If there's one country that really gets infrastructure, it's China, one of the few nations on Earth that has a habit of regularly announcing vast and bewildering megaprojects of all stripes, and more often than not, actually sees them through to completion. It feels like only yesterday that we were announcing a grand plan to completely revolutionize rail travel in the country with the construction of a vast and comprehensive network of high-speed lines that covered the entire nation, which is no small feat given that China is quite big. Yet despite the skepticism and even mockery that they received from some Western pundits at the time, here we are in 2024. And sure enough, China now has 28,000 miles, that's 45,000 kilometers of the stuff, enough to make the majority of high-speed rail in the world, period, Chinese. And yet, it appears as though Beijing is not satisfied with merely just blowing the rest of the world out of the water when it comes to conventional rail, as they are currently in the nascent stages of doing it all over again with another, much more sci-fi type of rail, Maglev. So, let's have a look and see what this is all about, shall we? So let's get things started by clarifying some crucial things that will underpin this whole video. That being, what is a maglev train? To put it simply, a maglev train does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a train that uses magnets, mag, to levitate, lev, over the tracks it uses, rather than sit on them with those archaic wheel things the trains have otherwise used since the black and white days of top hats and mutton chops. To go into more detail, however, maglev trains use two different sorts of systems: electromagnetic suspension, EMS, and electrodynamic suspension, EDS. EMS uses electromagnets built into the train itself, which interact with ferromagnetic rails. When energized, these electromagnets create a magnetic field that repels the train from the rail, lifting it into a levitated state. Happy days. This system requires stringent active control to keep the train stable and maintain a consistent gap between the train and the track, because should the train's electromagnets fail or the magnetic field between the track or the train be disrupted, well, the people on board are not going to have a very good day, let's put it that way. By contrast, EDS employs superconducting magnets on the train to generate magnetic fields that interact with conductive coils in the track. As the train moves, it induces currents in these coils, creating magnetic fields that lift the train by repulsion, a subtle but distinct difference, and one that still comes with the very important safety concerns of EMS. For propulsion, both EDS and EMS trains use linear motors. Unlike traditional motors in a normal electric or diesel-powered locomotive, which generate power on board and use a transmission to push that power into a set of wheels, a linear motor is instead positioned outside of the locomotive along the track, and the electromagnetic field it generates pushes the locomotive forward. Speed regulation is achieved by altering the electrical current of the linear motor. Draw more power and you'll go faster, less and you'll go slower, cut it all together and you'll come to a halt. Since maglev trains don't actually touch their tracks, guidance is also quite a bit of a big deal. After all, a maglev train clipping its rails and plowing several hundred passengers into the ground at high speed wouldn't exactly be conducive to the operation of a reliable and profitable timetable. It is achieved typically through systems that integrate with the levitation mechanisms, but in different ways depending on the type of maglev in question. In EMS configurations, the electromagnets that levitate the train also provide lateral stability, keeping the train centered over the track. And by contrast, EDS systems often utilize the inherent stability provided by its magnetic fields, which naturally center the train above the track as it moves. So now the question is, why bother with all of this? Trains with wheels are pretty good. Well, partly this is due to maintenance, or rather the lack of maintenance that maglev lines need compared to traditional lines. There's very little wear and tear on the track since nothing actually touches them, and thus a fortune can be saved on highly qualified and very expensive engineers. Such a consideration is drab, however, and a far more exciting thing is speed. Again, since maglev trains don't actually touch the track, it means that a particular demon that has cursed railway engineers for over 2 centuries now can be banished down to the pits of hell. And that is, of course, friction. For the swiftly minded, friction is the enemy, always present, touching your wheels, slowing you down. By eliminating it altogether, you eliminate one of the major caps to a locomotive's maximum speed.
Do you ever find yourself lost in the maze of website building, desperately seeking a way out? Well, fear not, because this video is sponsored by Squarespace, your ultimate escape plan from website woes. With Squarespace, creating a stunning website is ridiculously easy. Maybe you've got a brilliant idea, but the thought of building a website makes you want to quit. And that's where Squarespace Blueprint AI comes in. It's like having your very own website wizard guiding you through the process, ensuring that your site not only looks fantastic, but also gets discovered by the right people. But there's more. Let's talk about Squarespace's flexible payments feature. It's the ultimate convenience for both you and your customers. You can accept payments seamlessly with credit cards, PayPal, and even Apple Pay. Plus, in eligible countries, you can offer your customers the option to buy now and pay later with Afterpay and ClearPay. And making this all possible is Fluid Engine, a next-gen drag-and-drop editor, bit like a magic wand, turning your design dreams into reality in just a few clicks. Whether you're a design novice or a seasoned pro, Fluid Engine empowers you to unleash your creativity and build a website that truly reflects your brand. So head to squarespace.com/megaprojects for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use the promo code MEGAPROJECTS to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. So next time you're website building, remember Squarespace. And now back to today's video.
Alright, so now let's have some background context. China's current foray into maglev trains isn't actually its first attempt, as they last had to go back in the late 90s, a time when, to be blunt, the rail system was a massive pile of junk. Its trains were old, they were slow, and they were uncomfortable. Pretty much a disgrace for a nation that was then in its nascent stage of becoming one of the big boys on the world stage. Finding this state of affairs rather irksome, Beijing resolved to do something about it by constructing a vast network of intercity high-speed trains. But this presented a question. What form should the new network take? Did they go for Japanese-style conventional bullet trains, which were tried and tested, or did they go for this whiz-bang maglev stuff? Intrigued by the latter prospects, they commissioned the German company Transrapid, then pioneers in the technology, to build them a line in Shanghai, one that ran from Pudong Airport to the city center. This was quite a sensible approach, to be fair, because even if they didn't pursue maglev any further, Shanghai still got a belting airport connection out of it. Construction began in March 2001, and after a lengthy period of testing, it opened to the public in January 2004. The end result stretched for 19.5 miles, 30.5 kilometers, and still remains the fastest train in regular commercial service in the whole world, topping out at 268 miles per hour or 431 kilometers per hour in routine service, with an overall top speed of 280 miles per hour or 450 kilometers per hour, which it hit in pre-service testing. Its construction was a monumental financial undertaking, costing approximately $39.75 million per kilometer, totaling $1.2 billion for the entire line. As a result of this cost, and despite the impressive technological achievement that the line represents, it has struggled to achieve financial viability and has more or less run at a loss for every single year of its operation. As a result of this, maglev was not selected for further development when the time came, and instead they went for conventional high-speed trains. Oh, just a small little tangent here before we bring this chapter to a close. We can personally vouch for what an utterly insane experience it is riding the Shanghai maglev. Both the writer of this piece and me have both ridden it, and it's ridiculous. Following the failure of the Shanghai maglev to be selected for wider adoption, it was assumed that was it, that Beijing had placed all of its chips on the red spot of conventional high-speed rail and was not going to be making a cheeky flutter on the black maglev spot, and that the Shanghai maglev was just going to be left doing its thing in isolation until it inevitably broke, became too expensive to repair, and was ferried off to a railway museum somewhere to sit gathering dust as a glorious monument to what could have been had Beijing felt just a tad more risky back in the early noughties. But then, in 2016, everything changed as the China Railway Rolling Stock Corporation, or CRRC, a state-owned rolling stock company, suddenly announced that it had begun work on a new maglev train, one that they hoped would reach a top speed of 373 miles per hour, 600 kilometers per hour, which would make it the single fastest thing on Earth, period. At that point, the Western world pretty much said in union, yeah, sure you are, and patronizingly patted the CRRC on the head, completely blind to the fact that China is a country that regularly announces mega projects of all kinds, and more often than not, they actually finish them. Imagine their surprise then, when not even 2 months later, the CRRC announced it was going to start constructing a 3.1 mile or 5 kilometer stretch of test track in Qingdao, which would allow them to put the new train through its paces and run it up to its maximum speed with a view of having it completed by the back end of 2018. China was serious about large-scale maglev production. From there, things went quiet for a time as the CRRC's boffins retreated to their workshops and set about the long and arduous task of bringing a fully functional, top-of-the-line intercity high-speed maglev train and a system of tracks above which it could float into reality. Slowly but surely, a few years down the line, more and more maglev lines got announced as CRRC's work only went from strength to strength. It started off small at first, with Beijing announcing in 2019 that it was going to build a 621-mile or 1,000-kilometer network of 9 different maglev lines, the most notable aspects of which were a 102-mile, 164-kilometer stretch between Shanghai and Hangzhou, a 68-mile, 110-kilometer line linking Guangzhou and Shenzhen, and a 188-mile or 302-kilometer-long Chengdu to Chongqing line. From there, in true Chinese megaproject form, things got a bit bigger, and by early 2021, lines linking Urumqi to Langzhou, Chengdu to Dayang, Shanghai to Hangzhou, and Shanghai to Shenzhen were all announced as well. But there's even more. Because then, by the close of 2021, further lines from Beijing to Shanghai were announced, as well as a cheeky little extra spur to pop Hong Kong onto the end of the Guangzhou-Shenzhen line. And if you tot this all up, it is about 2,485 miles or 4,000 kilometers of maglev lines announced. As when all of this will be open, that's a lot more difficult to say. Beijing is, perhaps quite sensibly, given how subject to delays megaprojects tend to be, reluctant to put a hard date on any of these lines' opening dates. But looking at what Chinese newspapers say, expect to see the ribbons likely being cut around 2030, with maybe a few of the shorter ones opening a touch earlier. When it comes to cost, however, we have absolutely no idea. There's so little reliable reporting out there on this specific matter that it really is very difficult to say. But just for the sake of having some number to work with, if we note the fact that the Shanghai maglev cost $1.2 billion for its 19.5 mile track, which is worth today about $2 billion, and that Japan is predicting to spend around $82 billion on its 285 kilometer Chou Shinkansen line between Tokyo and Nagoya, it isn't unreasonable to suspect that the cost of all of China's maglev lines may well creep up close to the $1 trillion USD mark when all is said and done. It sounds mad, but when you consider that figure is around the yearly US military budget mark, that the Chinese economy isn't much smaller, and that the cost is being split over many years, it is certainly in the realms of possibility at least. And now, that's all fun and games, but what of the train that will glide over all of those tracks? That's the fast bit. That's the bit we really all care about. So what's going on with that? Well, worry not, because that question was answered in 2021 when this bad boy, the CRRC 600, glided out of the factory in Qingdao and was announced to the public. It is a 5-car set, able to be expanded up to 10 cars, and is designed to operate at speeds of 373 miles per hour or 600 kilometers per hour, hence its name. Its unveiling followed extensive testing phases, including a successful test run of a prototype on the 1.5 kilometer guideway at Tongji University in Shanghai back in 2019. It still hasn't finished testing and entered serial production because CRRC really want to get it right, which is probably sensible given what is at stake if such a fast-floating train has a bit of a whoops-a-daisy. The brakes alone, which work through using a magnetic pole to apply magnetic force to the opposite direction of travel, took over 19 months to develop and engineer. It's also planned to be fully autonomous, but not unmanned, with its driver being referred to as an attendant in a CRRC press release. This is someone who can drive the train if they have to, but in 99% of operations, they'll just be keeping an eye on things and making sure the automatic systems are functioning correctly. Now, this is all jolly exciting, but it's only one part of the story, because while all this big and fancy intercity maglev stuff is capturing the front pages, a much more humble story is unfolding on the back pages, one in which China is slowly but surely rolling out slower-paced maglev tech on the inner city level, and on quite an impressive scale, it has to be said. So now, let's bring this chapter to a close and take a look at that in more detail. The first such line was the Changsha Maglev Express, which runs for a length of 11.5 miles or 18.5 kilometers and connects Changsha Huanghua International Airport with Changsha South Railway Station. Operation commenced on the 16th of May 2016, after construction began in May 2014 and trial runs started in December 2015. It had an initial operating speed of 62 miles per hour, 100 kilometers per hour, which was later up to 87 miles per hour, 140 kilometers per hour, following the introduction of a newer model of train in July 2021. As things stand, the line has 3 stations, but there are plans to extend the system by 2.8 miles or 4.5 kilometers to include 2 additional underground stations at Terminals 2 and 3. It currently just connects to Terminal 1. As for how much it costs, figures vary source to source, but the most commonly agreed upon amount is $749 million. Then there's the so-called SkyTrain, which opened in early 2022. Built to serve Qingguo County in Guangzhou Province, this line took a rather different approach to its construction as compared to any of the others that we've looked at, as you've likely already deduced by the picture. It levitates above a rail, which itself sits above the train, giving the passengers unmarked panoramic views of the surrounding landscape and leaving them to feel as if they are flying as it glides above the grounds, hence the name. Interestingly, unlike traditional maglevs, the SkyTrain employs permanent magnets on the tracks rather than electromagnets, with the idea being to reduce the line's electricity usage, thereby making it both greener and cheaper to operate. It currently runs at a maximum operating speed of 80 kilometers an hour, 50 miles per hour, along a half-mile, 800-meter long stretch of track, and has a capacity for 88 passengers. In many ways, it's the direct descendant of the Shanghai Maglev. Just like that was a test for Maglev trains, the SkyTrain is a test for a vertical suspension system. And everything seems to have gone well, because barely a year after its opening, an extension was announced that would see it extended by 4.7 miles, or 7.5 kilometers, and opened up to a top speed of 75 miles per hour, 120 kilometers per hour. That's how much it costs? Again, we don't know. No hard figures have ever been released, but Qingguo County officials have said that it set them back roughly 10% of the cost of a subway per kilometer, and since we know that a Chinese subway typically costs around $138 million per kilometer, we have a reasonable guess that the 800-meter initial section of track cost them around $11 million. Then, in July 2022, Fengquan in Hunan province cut the ribbon on the Fengquan Maglev, a 5.7-mile, 9.1-kilometer line that connects the city's high-speed railway station with the historic Old City, stops off at several tourist hotspots along the way, and runs at a maximum speed of 62 miles per hour, 100 kilometers an hour. Constructed by the China Railway Engineering Corporation, the line was completed in just under 2 years for a reported cost of $329 million. It is unapologetically a tourist line, and as such had enormous amounts of money put into building its stations in a way that reflected local architectural traditions with an overall theme of mythical Fengquan bird for which the city is named. Daily ridership currently sits at around 30,000 people, a little over the line's break-even point, and it seems to be suffering from no mechanical or reliability problems. Finally, there's also the Maglev tourist line, currently under construction in Qingguan, Guangdong Province. Just like the previous lines we looked at, it is to be an internationally super high-tech, top-of-the-line system designed to bring in bucket loads of tourists cheaply and efficiently, and also to wow them with some whiz-bang tech while doing so. It is being built in 3 stages, the first of which runs for 5 miles or 8.1 kilometers, connects to Yingzhang Station on the Guangzhou Qingguang Intercity with Qingguang Chimelong Theme Park. It's also due to open for full public operation later this year. It's expected to carry 315 passengers per train at speeds up to 75 miles per hour, 120 kilometers an hour. The second stage will see it extended to 23.6 miles or 38 kilometers in length and connects the South China Tiger Breeding Center and Mailin Lake to the line, and the third stage is yet to be announced. Ultimately, all of this is just the tip of the iceberg, a small flavor to give you an idea of just how extensive provisional maglev construction has been in China. There are even more still, but if we were to go into all of them, then we'd be here all day. So as long as you've got an awareness that there are loads of them being built, well, that's good enough for now. And with that, well, story's done, at least for now, this is an ongoing story. Will this all come together as planned? In a decade's time, will China be blowing us out of the water with a network of sci-fi trains while most of us back in the West struggle with just conventional high-speed trains? Frankly, we think it's a safe bet that they will. Not only does China have a near unbeaten record on mega projects generally, but their maglev projects specifically actually look quite reasonable when you consider that China already has the tech, has some of the best minds on the globe working to refine it further, and is actually slapping their wallet down when it comes to pay for it. Oh, And one last thing, China is also in the very early stages of developing a Hyperloop system, a transportation system that uses capsules supported by an air-bearing surface within a low-pressure tube to achieve simply blistering speeds. And the prototype has already beaten 387 miles per hour or 623 kilometers per hour in testing, and it's aiming for 621 miles per hour. That's 1,000 kilometers an hour when it goes live. So maybe we'll meet back here in 10 years talking about China's soon-to-be obsolete Maglev system. See you then.